Hello, guys. On the channel, we often speak about Putin's desire to steal the Ukrainian history. It's actually not just Putin's desire, it's the problem of the century of the Russian history. But they forget about one very important thing. By rewriting books, stealing artifacts, you cannot steal the qualities your nation need to possess to actually create this history in these artifacts. And today I am honored and excited to welcome to the channel Milena Chorna, who is also a founder of the Ukrainian Association of Museums, a renowned Ukrainian art historian, and most importantly, she is extremely active in protecting, popularizing, and saving, literally saving Ukrainian cultural heritage in times of the big war. Welcome to the channel, Milena.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure for me. Thank you.
I have a very wide audience coming from different corners of the world and different professions. They do understand that right now Ukraine is fighting for survival, but it's also a global European war, world war to a great extent if we speak about culture, people. And I think it would be nice to start this conversation with real examples because you have direct contacts with Ukrainian museums, galleries, big and small, that are on the temporarily occupied territories or were liberated. Could you share some real life stories, cases of how people went through this experience and what is it like, how it actually influences the collections, the museums, and the people working there?
Thank you for the question. It is a rather emotional question for me because when everything started in 2022, a lot of my colleagues and a lot of my friends, they they just in one day they were occupied. There was no chance for them to leave, and they wouldn't leave actually because. Museum workers and cultural heritage experts, they have this specifics, and it's one of the biggest problems in my line of work, being the head of the Ukrainian Museum Association, is making them leave. Because while the artifacts are not evacuated, while their teams are still there, they just refuse to leave. And I can share, unfortunately, I can share only the stories from the already deoccupied regions. And one story of Luhansk Museum of Local Lore that is twice relocated. Well, let's start with the deoccupied. Yes, we have contact with the people on the occupied territories, but I cannot share their stories yet because
That's
it will
understandable.
put them at tremendous risk. Talking about the situation in occupation, Kherson region. Kherson Art Museum, and I believe many of the people have heard about that. Kherson Art Museum, talking about creativity in saving your artifacts. The director of Kherson Art Museum, she's not very young, let me put it this way, but her father was military, and she has this really strong character. She stayed behind in occupation, although her home, her apartment, was really close to Antoniv Mist bridge, Antoniv Bridge, where actually it was really heavy missile attacks there.
Mhm.
She stayed in occupation, and we contacted her like every day, starting with the first days of the full-scale invasion. She put these, construction materials all around the building of her art museum, and she spread the rumor across the city that the collection has been evacuated long time ago. Oh no, it has been evacuated long time ago. You can see we have reconstruction here. We have restoration work going on here because there was no way she could evacuate the artifacts within one day, and it's a huge collection. So the team stayed behind, and she switched the guards because she realized that Ukrainian museums are usually guarded by the state security service,
Mhm.
and they are all military. So she switched the young men that guarded the museum. She changed them to elderly ones, to those that were retired military, and she instructed them. They had all this innocent, faces of retired people, and well, I'm just a small guy, no military background, etc. And they held the perimeter. She told that the news about the collection being evacuated spread all across town, and the only people that knew that it was still there were just a few workers of the museum. But unfortunately, and she succeeded in maintaining this legend for almost half a year. Unfortunately, within half a year, they started looking for her, and they started calling her to meetings because, and it's a great surprise. It was a great surprise for me that it happened like within a few months and not within days, because other my friends that stayed in occupation, they were called for a talk within a few weeks. Because once the Russians go into a city or a town, first they look for military and for veterans and for their families. And then they look for museum workers, because museum workers are opinion leaders of their community. And
Mm-hmm.
they make attempts to engage them in their politics. And most of the museum workers refuse. And then when bad things happen, like in Melitopol, that's when they get kidnapped, tortured, etc. So when she was called for this meeting, she realized that that's the point when she has to run and she has to flee. She fled like an innocent elderly lady that was going to visit her nephew. But and I believe it's a case of true heroism. Um, she asked her friend, head of the collections department. I'm sorry, it's an
Yeah,
emotional,
yeah, that's emotional. And
because these calls every day, and you keep in touch, and you try to monitor the situation, but there's nothing you can do. There's
mhm.
nothing you can do to help these people once they're in occupation. She asked her friend, head of the collections department, Hanna Skripnik, to stay behind. And she even wrote a paper that I'm officially, as a director, I'm asking you to stay behind and monitor what's going on with the collection. And only thanks to Hanna Skripnik that remained there, that when Russians came and started looting, she downloaded the videos of them looting, and that's what we have now, and we will use that in court. And well, that's the proof of direct, and targeted looting. But talking about looting, they do not loot artifacts and collections immediately. Once they occupy the territories, they transform the museums. They change the narratives, and they come in really prepared. They know how to do that within days. They change the narratives, they change the biographies of the painters, for instance. And if they were born during the Russian Empire period, they say it's a Russian painter. Or, well, he got his education in Russia. They change a lot of narratives. And they loot only once they realize that Ukrainian army is coming, to deoccupy. So it's like their last, action. But most of the occupied museums at present, the artifacts remain there, and just with the, false narratives, let's put it this way. Another story of the Luhansk Museum of Local Lore, the director Olesya Milovanova, she was occupied within one day. She could not evacuate anything, and it is really tragic because she already lost the collection once at that point.
Mhm.
They lost the collection in Luhansk. They had to flee within a day. They couldn't take anything with them, and they moved to Starobilsk. They relocated there, and then Starobilsk was occupied within a day. But she had to stay behind with her small son, 10-year-old son. Well, actually, he's now 10 years old. He was 8 then. He
Mhm.
stayed behind because starting with 2014, and the war, as we know, started in 2014, it just wasn't full scale. She made exhibitions about veterans, about war veterans, about documented the war, because Luhansk has been the front line ever since 2014. She documented the war. She had the biographies of war veterans, of information on their families, and she knew that she had to hide these documents someplace. So she stayed in occupation for a month, changing flats, changing her locations, in order to each day to go back to the museum until they switched the locks. When they changed the locks, there was no possibility to get in. But each day she went there. And two of her researchers were standing along the road, to see if the Russian soldiers are coming, to let her know that you have to run. And she took all the documents out, because if Russians found all these materials, first of all, they would have direct algorithm of where to find and what this soldier is known for. Well, these people would have been killed, and their families as well. But within a month, she realized, when she already saved the documents, and she was told that they were looking for her, like really seriously. So that's when she had to flee. And I really love this story, because museum worker is a museum worker always. When she fled with the help of Ukrainian army, she took her son. She couldn't take any documents, any photographs. She only took like a few things. And the legend was that I'm going to the neighboring town. I sell textiles. I sell clothes on the local market, and I'm going there to sell, and I'll be coming back later today. And she was really worried, because the boy, he was really small at the time, 8 years, and he learned the legend. But if and the Russians have a tendency to split families. They take children apart, away from their parents, and well, they investigate, they interrogate them. And she was really afraid that the boy would, slip. Uh, Make a slip of a tongue and say something about museum, etc. But when she was fleeing, and it was like really early morning, because she really was hoping that the Russians would be sleepy on the checkpoint, and they really were. When she was fleeing, the soldiers that were waiting for her on the other side, they saw a Russian bombarder being shot down, and they saw that the pilot catapulted. And he survived. They saw him run to the forest. So while they were waiting for Oleksii, they searched for this guy. They found him safe and sound. They took him to the car, and when Oleksii finally got to them, she even she gave him medicine because he was in pain. But she saw a parachute on him, and she was like, I've lost the collection twice already. This will be the first artifact of my third collection. And this parachute and the catapult actually seat is now exhibited in the State Aviation Museum, because they do not have their premises yet. They have relocated to Lviv, then to Kiev. They are still searching for exhibition halls, but this parachute has already went to Switzerland, to Lausanne, and now it's in Kiev, and it's an interesting story. But the funniest part in this is when this pilot was asked questions in Ukraine, because he was captured. He said, "Oh, everything was so great. People were so kind. They gave me medicine, etc." But they Ukrainian, we gave him back. We switched him for our pilots in 2023. And when he came to Russia, he continuously gives interviews saying that Ukrainian museum workers are so harsh. They are so. I was so scared of the Ukrainian museum workers. And well, we laugh a lot, because, a small lady with a small boy, but we are scary. Yeah. We are resilient, and that's why we are scary. Well, I have a lot of other stories, but
That's a beautiful story. And actually, you're so right that museum workers are very special people. And even in times of these tremendous challenges, they combine their personal life, saving their children, themselves, with saving the collections and Ukraine in general. One of the greatest mistakes that many people, especially in those European institutions, keep making, saying it's Putin's war, when we obviously understand that these missiles are targeted not by Putin alone, soldiers who crossed the border. And here comes the next question you've partially touched. When we talk about these cases of looting, or, I don't know, taking out these exhibits to the Russian Federation, many imagine that these are just soldiers doing. Are there any professionals involved from the Russian side? How would you describe these typical cases of crimes that Russians commit towards against Ukrainian museums?
Thank you for the question. There is a whole team, a small team, but a team of lawyers that have cultural background and love museums. They are at the forefront now. They are in the army, and they are gathering proof. They're gathering evidence of such crimes, of deliberate crimes. You know that it's not some spontaneous looting. It happens. Spontaneous looting does happen, but it is it's really
Rare.
not frequent. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
It's more like one case in 100. And it's small cases. Well, some soldiers saw a small painting, and he just, snapped it.
Mhm.
When
Mhm.
we are talking about systematic looting, for instance, Kherson, um, we do not have direct proof, but we have indirect proof. For instance, we had museum workers who testified to the fact that when they came to choose the paintings, and it was really barbaric because they had little time and they just cut them out of the frames, like, well, I don't know, like rubbers.
Robbers,
Robbers, yeah, they are. And
looters.
we have, a 1,000-year-old tradition. They started doing
Yeah.
that like in the 11th, 12th century. And the Vladimir,
Вышгородская икона.
yeah, yeah. Vladimir icon, which they say it's their main icon, is a Vishgorod, Holy Mother of God. So
Many smart people say that there's reparations, real reparations, must start with the return of this icon back to Kiev.
absolutely, absolutely. 12th century. I mean, these guys do not change their,
Not NATO.
no, no, no. Leopards do not change their spots. Yeah, not in this jungle. And the evidence, well, indirect evidence, says that some of our people, and some of them even called me, but I cannot name that museum where the people called me from.
Mhm.
It's still occupied. Whole teams came in and they browsed the collection, and they came in the white shirts like uniforms, and
Mhm.
they overheard the terminology these people were using, and it was a specific museum terminology used specifically in art theory, in art history. And they, while browsing the collections, they said, "Oh, well, this is worth it. Oh, this is no, it's nothing." So they came to evaluate actually. In Kherson, there was similar evidence that people came using museum terminology, and they knew what was worth what, and they identified the artists. And the museum I cannot name, the
Mhm.
person from there, she said, maybe I can make a picture of them, discreetly. I can make a picture of them. I said, no, no, come on, no. If you make a picture of them, of course, that would simplify the things, and that would prove we could find these faces, who these people were, from which museum in Russia, but it's too risky to do that. So
Yeah, it could
just
worth a
only
life.
indirect. And of course, museum workers are monitoring internet themselves, and they're seeking for the artifacts because they know their collections the best. They know what came from their collections, and some of the things, yes, they were found in auctions, and this information has been sent to this team of lawyers, and they are gathering the documents now.
Thank you for sharing. And actually, I'm very grateful to the Raphael Lemkin Society for introducing us. And we began preparing this interview discussing these responsibilities that justice must be delivered to the Russian criminals. And we understand that not only they steal artifacts, exhibits like paintings, not only they ruin some of the exhibits because they are classical criminals, looters, but they also use it to undermine Ukrainian history, to falsify our cultural heritage, or to present it as Russian. Can you maybe share some of the examples that you've heard about how stolen from the Ukrainian museums artifacts are later used to spread this Russian narratives?
Yes, I can most definitely share some stories, but first of all, I'd like to emphasize that, well, from my personal point of view and from everything I've observed and heard, they loot whatever they can use and whatever they can appropriate in their history, whatever they can say it's ours, like Scythian gold, because they had Scythians on their territory as well, or Kiev Rus, which they believe was the start of a Russian, which is not. So, so whatever they can use, implement in their history to prolong their history, like 1,000 years or 2,000 years, they loot. Whatever identifies us as different nations, whatever shows our unique characteristics, like Cossack history, Cossack Baroque artifacts and Baroque architecture, embroidery, which is really different from Russian, they destroy. And I would like to just say about one case in Kharkiv region, Kupiansk. There was this museum of local lore, and I believe it's not only my opinion what they loot and what they destroy. And the director there, Irina Sacha, unfortunately deceased, she stayed in occupation. And she even went to all these meetings. And that's another question. How will we review these biographies after the war? Because she was not a collaborator, but she stayed behind and she went to all the meetings because she wanted to snatch from her collection, from her museum collection, embroidery, which she knew would be destroyed. The oldest Bible that she had, written in Ukrainian, not an old Slavic language. And she buried them in the ground. She's hid it among her co-workers and in her flat. Unfortunately, yes, she was killed in the line of duty. After Kupiansk was deoccupied, she started evacuating. And she managed to evacuate the first line, as we call it, like the most precious things. And she was killed by a direct missile attack to the museum once she was, continuing the evacuation. So yeah, there are such proof that most of us know that something they will destroy immediately, and some things they will loot. And Scythian gold, Melitopol, also we can see that what they choose to loot, what they can implement, yes, in their history. Mariupol, Ukrainian painters, not Ukrainian, but they were born in Ukraine, Kuinji, who was of Greek descent,
Encouraging, yeah, but
not Russian. But they made him, the Russian Empire made him the great Russian painter, and they valued that the most. That's how they choose what they want and what they don't want.
I think that a lot of Ukrainians witnessing right now what they do to substitute the real history now realize more of the lies we lived in for 300 centuries. And you remind me actually of this destruction of Zaporizhzhia siege. And the very first things that were destroyed were Cossacks' archives and some important cultural artifacts that described it as a separate state, as an independent state. And they repeated for 300 years, guys. It's not a NATO-provoked war. Trust Ukrainians. I feel a lot of support and understanding from those countries who were once occupied by the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union, and specifically the Baltics. And recently I was visited by a delegation of colleagues from the Vilnius National Museum, and one of their first questions was, could you introduce us with Lutsk museums, because I'm in Lutsk and from Lutsk, that's my hometown.
Great.
And I tried to find some people, and that were really magical, important conversations, way more important than excursions or dinners or some project talks, because they had lots of questions and they kept asking our museum workers about how they organized evacuation, were they prepared. They had so many questions. Did you get instructions from Kyiv and so on? And when our museum workers explained how dynamic war is, that when you literally have tanks in Kyiv, you don't have time for instructions, and how much creativity is involved in this process. And you have beautifully described that with the first stories. But are there any advice, or at least things that you can tell to people who want to preserve their cultural heritage in these very dangerous, very chaotic times? What at least to focus on? Any observations, because I believe that Ukrainian experience is very important and unfortunately might be needed in other countries too.
Yes, unfortunately. I've had a chance to talk a lot about that because I do not only work as a museum worker here and head of the Museum Association, but I'm also an expert of the working group on safeguarding cultural heritage of Ukraine at the European Commission. We
Hmm.
had 3 years to talk it through with our European colleagues, and the first thing I say is um, people keep asking, you didn't have protocols, evacuation protocols. And I said, no, we do have. And in fact, our protocols are almost the same as you have, but they don't work. And they do not work because they are based on multiple parties engaged, because you rely on firefighters that will come in and help in this, on soldiers that will come in, or police and will help with that, and it will not happen that way, unfortunately. And yes, these protocols are great, but they are designed for an ideal world, which was envisioned after the Second World War, when
Yeah.
biggest part of the world, yes, people believe that never again. But the
Hmm.
fact is that all this time, starting with the with the end of the Second World War, there were people in Soviet Union, and a lot of them, who kept saying, "We can repeat." And
Hmm.
"we can repeat" is a Russian slogan for decades. We can repeat to Berlin, and they're really proud of themselves. We can repeat. And Europeans, most predominantly Europeans at this point, should acknowledge the fact, and I believe the acknowledgement, the realization has already come, in 2 and 3 years. Especially, of course, Baltic states, Poland, but even Denmark.
Finland. Hmm.
Yeah, England, even Denmark, England, France. I keep hearing from colleagues, yeah, we are getting ready. We are getting ready because for 80 years we lived in an ideal world where nothing will happen to us, and it's not so. We can see that it's not so. We failed to evacuate, not only because we had no instructions, we had evacuation protocols, etc. But first, everything happened really fast. And talking about Lutsk, Oksana Vajatka, head of the
Local lore museum.
local lore museum, her husband is in the army now, and she said, "Well, you cannot imagine. We realized we are really close to the border. Of course, not with Russia, with Belarus. It's almost the same.
Hmm.
And we had to dismantle the whole permanent exhibition like within a day, both art museum and local lore museum, and we had no packing materials. We had nothing. They
Secondhand. They use secondhand clothes.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. That's what they did. And it sounds horrible now, but they succeeded, and
That's what matters.
that's what matters. Yes. And so the first advice would be, do not relax, be prepared. Think about the algorithms. And only in few states in Europe there is autonomy for the museum directors. What was the biggest problem here is that everyone was gone. Firefighters will not help you. They will be saving people out of the wreckage. Soldiers will be fighting. Police will be fighting. You'll be left all alone with your collections.
Plus, your families will be in danger. Your
Yes,
parents, your children.
exactly. And you have to,
Balance.
balance. Unfortunately, I know I don't know a single person amongst the museum directors at the forefront or occupied territories who prioritize their families. That's a fact. Unfortunately, it's a fact, but that was their choice, and it was a conscious choice. And for instance, the director of Pokrovsk Museum of Local Lore, when now in 2024 the Russian army started approaching, she left the town only when Russians were 15 kilometers away from the city. And she has a teenage daughter, and that's the only thing that made her leave. Otherwise, she would stay there. Donetsk Art Museum, my friend, she lost her husband at the forefront, and she has a teenage son. She took her teenage son to another city. He is staying with museum workers, with our colleagues. Yeah, we became a family now. It's like with relatives. She left him there, and now she's in Kramatorsk because she wants to be with her community, with her museum. So it's really hard for me, especially because you have to I feel responsible for making these people leave, and I try to pressure them, but they would not. If they leave, they're really connected with the land, with the community, and if they leave like 50 kilometers away in the same region, right next to there. The colleagues from Melitopol Museum, the ones that was looted, they fled to other parts of Zaporizhia region. And I keep asking, I mean, what's the sense of leaving in 50 kilometers if Russians will come there in a month, okay, in half a year, but you have to run again. And they said, well, maybe not. And we want to be here close to Melitopol because once it's deoccupied, we want to be the first ones there.
Yeah.
And by the way, just maybe it will interest you, I can share the link. They built a Melitopol Museum of Russian History within a few months. And it's almost like a Disneyland. It's all filled with false narratives, but it's incredibly pricey, interactive, a lot of screens, a lot of attractions for children because they need zombies. But it has built within months. It was built, and in video you can see how
I think
beautiful.
that would be a great idea if you could provide a number of links that you consider interesting, starting from this like negative ones, but also maybe some positive that I could add to the description of this video and our viewers can check. Maybe something important will come up to their thoughts. I want to thank you for this very important conversation, but most importantly, for doing what you do in the circumstances of these times and also for saving these people. Because museums, collections are very important, but these people, this kind of people specifically, are so very important for the preservation of our culture and everything. And it's so true that love for your country is real, guys. You can clearly see that on us right now. It's not something poetic, not something from the 19th century. It's very real, very physical when people choose to stay under artillery shellings, but close to their communities and their treasures. Thank you so much, Milena. You're very special. I'm really honored to know you, and I hope we will stay in touch. Whenever anything important comes, you can share it with our community. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have just discussed an extremely important topic of Russian crimes that they constantly commit on the temporarily occupied territories in the museums and galleries, and the experience that many museum workers had during this short or long period of occupation. The problem is that by stealing, looting, destroying some of the exhibits, they also try to substitute our history to destroy Ukrainian cultural heritage. And this actually resembles cultural genocide as it is. And that is why I'm super excited and honored to welcome Anastasiia Oleksii, the executive director of Lemkin Society. And here I have an official introduction of this truly important Ukrainian NGO that unites institutions and professionals engaged in human rights and expertise related to safeguarding cultural heritage. Its core mission is to advocate for legal responsibility in cases of genocide on a cultural basis, support victims, and prevent such crimes in the future. And we all know we need that. The society serves as a platform for experts who uphold the principles of Raphael Lemkin, the prominent lawyer of the 20th century credited for the conceptualizing of genocide. And I will provide a link to your NGO page. So welcome to the channel, Anastasiia.
Thank you for inviting me, and I am honored to speak here about Raphael Lemkin and his work and about the Lemkin Society.
Not many people know that the author of this term is closely connected to Ukraine and its history, and actually speaking and defining the genocide, Raphael Lemkin described cultural genocide. Working in this area of communication, analyzing a lot of speeches of the global leaders, sometimes I get a feeling that many of them are more afraid of the term genocide, using the term genocide, than the genocide itself. And what we witness in Ukraine is definitely genocide. And it's extremely important to speak about this cultural aspect of it. Working in the area, how would you describe what cultural genocide is and what Russians actually do to us as we record this video, actually?
Yeah, so speaking about genocide and how people abroad afraid to tell what is going on in Ukraine, like genocide, it is important to know that we have the example of Holocaust and the physical destruction of the Jewish nation, and we cannot conquer with such big crime and such big tragedy, which happened during the World War II. But now in Ukraine, we can see that Russia cannot erase like a big nation, Ukrainian nation, physically, and as Russia, as Soviet Union. They destroy the representatives of political leaders, the religion leaders, and such ways they erase Ukrainian identity, not just killing physically people like big amount of people. They destroy these figures who creative, who have leadership, and so on. And also, they destroy our museums, cultural heritage sites, and such. And this way, people cannot like have places to get know about their identity, their culture, and so on. So they can put their Russian culture and name us Russians. So they like very systematic policy of
Russification.
Russification, and this is like one of the traces of cultural genocide. Since it is impossible to erase completely Ukrainian nation, Russia destroys Ukrainian cultural heritage and provide genocidal policy on the occupied territories, such as transfer of education on Russian language. They militarize the education on occupied territories, creating militarized classes. Also, they extract Ukrainian books and textbooks published after 1991 from Ukrainian libraries, school libraries, and we have the events when Russian soldiers had an order to burn them and to hide them and so on. We could observe this in Kupiansk region for several village schools were given an order official to extract all the Ukrainian textbooks and Ukrainian equipment. And so they were preparing to start the educational season in September 2022, but they didn't manage to do this, but we have such evidences.
That is another proof why it's so important to return Ukrainian territories. That's not just territories, that's history, education, future of the people.
Yeah, and when we talk about like cultural heritage sites, we can see that Russia does this systematically, and Ukrainian initiative, Ukrainian Heritage Monitoring Laboratory, they do documentation on site, and they sure they cannot. Do this on the occupied territories, but they managed to do this on near the front line on Mykolaiv region, Kherson region, and so on. So they documented over 1,000 objects destroyed or completely completely destroyed. So we have this image of how this systematically Russia do this without any military purpose. And speaking about killing Ukrainian cultural figures. we have the initiative People of Culture Taken Away by the War. And now in this list of killed civilian and military people who dedicated their civilian life to culture, to different, they have achievements in this sphere. There are now 181 names in this list. And we can see it is like, it's I just cannot describe how it is terrible for any culture to lost so many people uh, who could
Well, change a lot. Russians love asking questions like, "Where are your Nobel Prize winners? You keep killing them." And what is awful that we had a similar experience in the 30s with the executed Renaissance, when hundreds of Ukrainian intellectuals were first arrested and then executed. And right now it happens with
yes.
Ukrainian writers, painters, and people working in the sphere of culture. We have discussed with Milena Chorna, the founder of the Association of Ukrainian Museums, various cases when Russians destroyed the samples of those cultural heritage that demonstrate this difference between Ukraine and Russia. They steal objects that can somehow be used in their narratives, and they destroyed the ones that demonstrate this difference. And can you give any examples of maybe some successful cases, or at least the beginning of some cases that can become successful? I mean, legal, on how we can hold people accountable, or at least collect the data so that in future the objects can be returned. People guilty of that can be held accountable.
So we can see that Russia destroys everything it cannot appropriate, and very like bright example of this is Skovoroda Museum in Kharkiv region. It was destroyed by the direct hit, and no military was around, and it's like there was no military justify reason to hit this museum, and when we take a look at the personality of Grigory Skovroda, we can see that they cannot appropriate him. He's just had a different mindset, different philosophy, and they cannot make Grigory Skovoroda the part of their culture. So they destroy it, and like this parallel with destroying Ukrainian cities, towns, when they cannot like make them Russian, they destroy them, they like demolish them. So I think we have like these examples when they cannot like make something Russian, they destroy it. And another example is Mariupol Museum of Local Lore, which was destroyed and partially looted by Russians, and it was looted very organized. Now Russia used the exhibits from this museum in their like exhibitions, and talk about them as Russia, part of Russian culture. But as we know, Mariupol Museum of Local Lore talks about the how this region were created, like Azov area, how Greeks from Crimea escaped to this land, and how they started to live there, and there's no Russian there. So, and but somehow they appropriate and speak about all the museum objects they stole as a part of Russian culture, and they include all the museum objects into their funds. So and they legalize this looting, all the lootings they provide in Ukraine. Experts. They are part of the international community, and
Mhm.
they're welcomed on the conferences, and they're not like uh, they're in the ICOM, International Council of Museums, so there are no mechanism. And in this context, I would like to emphasize all the documentation initiatives that have been tracking the consequences of this full-scale invasion from its beginning. So they started to document different initiatives with different experience. They started to document war, and this is like a very distinguished feature for this war. This is the most documented war, and we have so many evidences and so many testimonies and so on of the not only like ordinary crimes but war crimes, and we should take a look at them as a genocidal practice, and we should recognize them systematically as genocide. And this is what is missed in all this process, that we do not prosecute all the crimes as one crime of genocide, and we should do this. And then all the world should recognize this war as genocidal.
Yeah, that's truly important to document. And exactly, this war literally happens like online. Everything is visible, but it's so important to have bravery and strength to name the things the way they are.
Yes, thank you.
These are actually very dangerous precedents when such crimes are not prosecuted. And you're so right. There are a lot of Russian experts, Russia connected people in various international cultural organizations, sport organizations, educational organizations that try to hide these crimes and legalize them. And, also having an NGO that works in the area of cultural heritage digitization. I remember how, like 5 years ago, digitization was super popular as one of the new tools. It's about sustainability, it's about like fashion in cultural heritage. But right now, after the start of the full scale war in Ukraine, we also understand that's the instrument to save the heritage, or at least to recreate it in future, to fix it for the next generations. Can you tell us a little bit more about this digitization of cultural heritage initiatives? How does it help in your work, and maybe some advice for museums and NGOs and people related from other countries watching us?
The digitization in a museum sphere is very like tricky in the like global world, because when we say is there like museum object like digital museum object is like has the same value as a physical museum object, we don't know. Like this is a question, but for Ukraine it is crucial to make digital copies of the museum objects, and also make digital
Please.
catalogs,
Mhm,
yes, of
mhm.
the museum objects, because the same we provide the support to Mariupol Museum of Local Law in their work on the online catalog of their lost collection, and this is a precedent for Ukraine, and I think it can be the precedent for the international institutions and museums, since the situation of in the world is like getting worse. Now this museum works without a physical collection. but they work. They provide their like routine work, and they work on the online collection. And now they transferred the digital copies of their inventory books into machine reading text, so it can be implemented in various systems like Interpol or like Ministry of Culture or other like system which can track the museum objects which can be appeared on in Russia or somewhere like some not legal traffic of the museum objects. So it is important to have such register of museum collection. And Mariupol Museum of Local Lore, they made digital copies of their inventory books when they received the order from the Ministry of Culture in maybe after the Russian invasion in 2014, I think. So they made these copies, and we have the information what was in the museum collection. And Russia does not have this information. They have only the objects they stole from Ukraine, and they has no like idea of the real collection. And this is huge for us because we have like this power to we have all the information, but we don't have like physical collection.
That is another example of very Russian attitude here, just looting something, not understanding what you have just stolen. And thank you so much for opening this totally different dimension of how the digitization works, that it actually helps tracking the objects and hopefully return them. Because there are some cases like the Scythian gold that returned back to Ukraine, and hopefully more of that to come. But I was, when I was reading more about your work, I was so surprised to learn about another project that you are directly connected to. And it's extremely interesting, and I hope you will be able to introduce our viewers a bit. It's wall evidence, and it's a collection of inscriptions left by Russian invaders on the temporarily occupied territories that later became liberated, especially during these first weeks or months of the invasions. Could you tell a little bit more about the project, maybe about the inscriptions, graffitis that impressed you most, because they actually tell a lot about the Russian culture?
So we started this project under the Mizhruchamy Culture Institution, and it was started in spring 2022 when Kiev, Sumy, and Chernihiv region were liberated, and we saw all the inscriptions and all the damage Russia left behind them. And it was impressive to see how they made civilian objects like houses, the military objects. So they like changed everything, and they not only destroyed but they made everything military, this civilian life. And it was very surprising and very like terrifying at the first when I saw the liberated territories. So, and this marks the all the inscriptions they left. All of them are impressive because it's like the evidence that Russians were there, and they cannot tell to the world they did nothing and they weren't there. So, and when we like look back and try to remember what happened, Russia denied their crimes. But we saw the inscriptions they left, and most of them are very savage, and they say that like, I will happily burn Ukrainian villages or so on. So they like just left the evidences of their intention to destroy Ukraine, to kill Ukrainian people. And maybe the most impressive inscription was this one: I will happily burn Ukrainian villages. And as I remember, this is the part of some Russian song. So this is the part of Russian culture, and there are a lot of Russian songs related to Wagner activities and related to this military system of Russia, and we can see how culture, how it is important, and also we can see how all the inscriptions Russia left in Ukraine, they are part of Russian culture. And we have two sides of the same coin, like big Russian culture and everything Russia do in Ukraine and other countries they invade. So, and this is the same. And people in the world should understand that when they speak with representatives of Russia, Russian culture, they speak to the representative of the aggressor. And this is the same. We cannot divide these two aspects of Russian culture.
Thank you. You have practically answered my next question, because this is indeed the true face of this modern Russian war culture as it is, and an extremely important proof that it's not just the Putin's war. There are hundreds of thousands of people responsible for the war crimes who spent and did awful things in Ukrainian villages, in Ukrainian cities, and you actually fix that in your project. And here I think we will connect a link to your webpage that actually has a lot of this photos fixed in different corners of Ukraine.
Also, we have Instagram page with some explanations and materials related to the inscriptions. So we have some investigations, like small investigations and researches on the topics, different topics. So
that is very important, and we will provide all the links so that you can check and you can see more and understand the reality. I honestly have a friend whose house was also looted, and she couldn't make herself return and stay there after all this graffitis left, after their presence in its house. It never felt safe.
yeah, and this is Russian and Russian world feature to leave the inscription, to leave their notes everywhere the world, and like when they invade some country, they leave them. But when they Russians travel around the world, they also leave different inscriptions, and they leave some war-related inscriptions, such these. With Russia, glory to Russia, and so on. So they leave all the messages, and they are very similar to some of the messages in Ukraine. And when Europe or United States think that Russia cannot invade them, they already have, but mentally. They mentally invades and leaving the graffitis with different messages.
Yeah, and with all the hybrid warfare, I have a feeling that more and more people in the European Union, for example, understand that Russia intends to attack them. And it's not safe even across the ocean, even in the United States, because they have a lot of evil plans to, undermine the so-called Western world, against which I'm sure they have some inscriptions too. Thank you so much for all these amazing tasks that you are doing in extremely challenging times, because we actually record this video after another brutal attack, perhaps again one of the largest ever, and they keep growing. But same is Ukrainian determination to defeat this evil, and to defeat this evil, we have to know its true face. I'd be honored if you agree to return to the channel with more detailed conversation on your project, wall evidence, because I'm sure some illustrations can tell us more about, again, this great Russian culture.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.